Okay, so I will start off with the first question. It is the analysis of the case on pages 58 through 60, McDonald's and Harvard, a structural odd couple. It talks about McDonald's, it's a worldwide company with over 31,000 stores. So even though it is broad, it has a very highly centralized and tightly controlled structure where the major decisions are made at the top. The managers and the frontline employees don't have a lot of say in decisions that are made. They want to make sure that everything is standard. So if you go in one McDonald's, you know you're getting the same thing as if you went in another one across the country. So they're really big into high quality and standardization. They did apparently try to let it slide a little bit, try to let the local franchises have a little bit more say, and they noticed that quality did go down, so they enacted all the strict regulations that they had before. They are also very efficient in what they do, all the way down to, I think it said like how many seconds were on the in the drink order. Let's see. So then talking about Harvard, their structure is almost the opposite. So it's decentralized. They have a lot of colleges that are self-contained. They have their own deans. They have their own endowments. And then there was the saying, every tub on its own bottom, and I had to look that up a little bit what that meant. So it means that every person, should be self-sufficient. So completely, opposite of McDonald's. And the professors there have enormous liberties with what they teach and how they teach. So these two different organizations, I thought, well, of course they have two different products. So that kind of gives the reason of why they're so different. Then it went on to compare two companies, Amazon and Zappos, that both have similar products. They're both online retail companies, but they are structured differently. So Amazon has a very strict organization structure as well, and their main focus is customers, even down to how long it takes from when the customer clicked on a page till when it was loaded. So they're very, very involved in operations and efficiencies and what the customer is seeing. Then Zappos is a little bit different. They are more focused on employees and making sure employees feel comfortable and have a good time, and then that will translate down to their customers. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So what I thought the difference was between these two companies is the employees that work with them. Some employees might prefer a stricter environment. They like the structure. And then there's employees that like a little bit more relaxed atmosphere and need that creativity to do what they need to do. So that was kind of my take on it. It's you can have similar products and have different structures and still be very successful. Or you can have two different products and be successful, but with different structures. And I think it all comes down to the employees that work within those structures.
I think I would have to agree with you on that. I was having a conversation with a manager today, and we were talking about the drive of people, and that's just something you can't instill. And some people just are driven to do things, and so I don't know that those type of people would necessarily have to have a very structured environment. They may be able to have a little bit more reign on what they are able to do themselves. And those that don't have the drive, they may need a little bit more structure into what they, in their daily working environment as far as what they need to accomplish or their daily duties or how much drink they put into a cup or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think that speaks to the book called it The Nature of the Workforce. It's where, more uneducated people, they like rules. Whereas, the more educated people, like the professors, like their autonomy and they want to do things their way. And
hmm
Mhm.
Be more creative and express
Right,
themselves.
right.
But I feel like, so that case explains the teamwork, which is the question that I answered, with how teams are used today in healthcare and how they're used in the future. But all of those companies operated differently, and they all developed down through like a hierarchy, because the case where it talked about McDonald's, they started out very small, it said, and then they grew. And they still have corporate offices, I'm sure, that are private offices where, they communicate to the frontline staff, okay, up through the hierarchy. And I feel like that's important as well, because I feel like that's also how healthcare operates.
Mm-hmm. And I thought it was interesting talking about teamwork, about how structures begin, like small organizations begin some way, so a team is built this way to the needs at that time. And then as it grows, the teams kind of evolve and morph into what they need to be. One example for healthcare is that we are opening up a new standalone ED, and the structure there is a little bit different than your typical ED. So a lot of the people that work there are going to be doing multiple different roles and positions, and they're all going to be working together. And as they're building this new ER department, that's who they're hiring and that's who they're looking for. And they're already kind of creating that team as they go. So it's neat to see one begin from the stages of beginning versus an ER department that's been there for 30 years already, and kind of how the teams are already set up and what they're doing currently. So I just thought that was interesting as well, in terms of where teams are going in the future of healthcare.
Yeah.
And I think technology is playing a huge role in that, considering how everything's already migrated to the EMR systems, and there's no paper anymore for the majority, and some are still switching over to that. And potentially in the future, teams could dwindle down because technology could take over people's roles and their jobs. There still will be teams because somebody has to operate the equipment, but I feel like it will start to make a huge impact on healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
One thing about teams that I have noticed throughout the organization that I'm in, and throughout healthcare in general, I think, is that a lot of teams, they are teams, but they're very siloed. And I guess what I mean by that is, this team works very well together as a team, but this team doesn't necessarily work with a team that may work at a sister hospital. They may have the same goals, but they may not know that each other have the same goals. They may be doing the same thing, but they may not necessarily know that because they don't communicate, which is very unfortunate, because why reinvent the wheel? Why should somebody, why should this one team need to put forth all this effort and time and money towards creating a new workflow or and whatever the case may be, if it's already been done, especially if it's with a sister hospital. And it's very unfortunate. Teams should work together, but I've seen it a lot where teams are very siloed, and even teams in the same organization, I think sometimes get competitive. One team has a goal, another team has a goal, and another team has a goal. And although they should be working towards the same goal, because their leaders are different, I think they silo themselves, and they don't necessarily work together. I think in the end they may have the same goal, but because their leaders are different, I don't necessarily know that they work together.
I think you just identified a structural tension.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where the teams just become focused on their own goal rather than the goal of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that prevents everybody not wanting to work together.
Yep.
Or
Yeah.
even if they don't know what the goal is and they're all just, like you said, working in silos and
Right.
instead of all towards the same goal.
Right.
I see that happens a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I looked at number 2, and so this question asks, has the structure of healthcare changed, or has the structure of healthcare organizations changed since 1997, and is it changing now? And I think it's fair to say that the structure has changed since 1997 overall. I think it would depend on the healthcare organization. I think traditionally they are very hierarchical. They have, the CEO underneath that. They typically have CFOs, CMOs, all the chief whatevers. Under that, they have the VPs. Then they may have the directors and the managers, maybe supervisors under that, and then frontline teammates. So I think it's very hierarchical, but I think they have progressed. I think we still see that, but I think hopefully it's gotten away from being so top heavy, and there's more of a frontline teammate focus than it being a lot of leaders, and a lot more focus on frontline teammates. And I know where I work, we do like input of the frontline teammates. Unlike McDonald's, we do really like feedback from the frontline teammates, because a lot of the best ideas, I think personally, that they do come from the people that are out there doing the work, instead of the people that are sitting in the corner office. What are your thoughts on that?
My thought on that is that I think there's a lot more emphasis on frontline staff being able to speak up. Before it was so hierarchical that you could only talk to your direct supervisor, and that maybe wasn't the physician that needed to know the information. And so I think it's opened up a lot more lines of communication this way they have it now. I think it's differently. They're working in smaller groups of teams, and then and working together to take care of the patient that way. Anyone else?
I have to agree with you on that one. I think that those lines of communication are. I think that is expected. That you're not necessarily. So I think you do follow the chain of command, but I think that you can speak to people above you. I don't think it's unheard of. I know someone that is in healthcare that is not able, for one reason or another, to speak to her direct supervisor, and so she actually has reached out and gone straight to the CEO several times. And so that's, I don't know, one or two chains up above her that she's able to do. And I think back in the 90s, that's probably unheard of. You don't do that. So I think that healthcare has definitely changed since then, and I think it'll continue to change because healthcare is changing, and it continues. The delivery of healthcare is changing. The population is growing older. There are more avenues for healthcare. Like you said, you're having a standalone ED. So healthcare is changing all around. So there has to be some kind of structural change for healthcare organizations.
It seems to me like a lot of the chief whatevers, as you called them, they're continually adding more of those for different categories, such as chief informatics officer or chief population health officer, or this or that. A lot of things that I had not really heard of till I started researching for this assignment.
Definitely.
I've seen a lot of that, but I've also seen a lot of that taken away, and with restructuring. and that could just be certain organizations, but they take the chiefs or the directors or the executive directors and those big high titles, and they kind of knock them down to regular directors or managers or supervisors or coordinators. And that could just be at, a local level or a one particular organization. But I have seen when they do restructure that they take, maybe it's the people that have been there for years and years and years, but they have taken those chief whatevers, they take that title away and they knock it down to something of a less lesser of a title.
I agree with you. I know that's happened in our specific organization, Amanda,
Mhm.
and it might make it easier for the frontline people to talk to managers and directors that way when they don't have such a big title after their name. A lot of people just get uncomfortable because they feel like their voice isn't being heard if they have a big title behind their name.
Yeah.
So, Whitney, you were talking about you feel like the work in healthcare is moving toward more like team oriented, and that kind of leads into my question, which was about the potential structural framework for healthcare delivery in the future. And I had a little trouble with this one. I did a lot of research, and I had trouble finding a lot about, future things, future frameworks. But right now, I believe that, well, it's in the literature that most, just hospitals, for instance, are professional bureaucracies, where pretty much the physician, for example, has the last say. What he says goes, pretty much. And I think in the future, in my mind, it's going to move more toward divisionalized. And I think that on a large scale, like, for example, now it seems like hospitals, say for instance, UNC Hospital has bought our local hospital in Lenoir, and it owns several of our physician practices. So, you've got the big hospital, but then you've got all these little hubs around it with the spokes, if you imagine that. And I think that's divisionalized structure to me. But then on a smaller level, I would say due to the changes in healthcare, and I think we're moving toward we're moving from fee for service to value-based care and more patient-centered care. And I think we're going to see more IPUs. They're, oh my goodness, I just lost my term. An IPU. Why can I not think? It's a patient care team. I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. But for instance, it's not grouped, say, a cardiology practice. It's grouped around the patient. For instance, say in their diagnosis, say for instance, someone that has breast cancer will be followed by a team of their own, like a social worker, a physician, a nurse, a discharge planner, a medical oncologist, surgical oncology, and they will have their own little team. And of course that team, would serve other people with this same type of condition, but it's based around an illness or a group of illness. And they will be trained to treat not just the cancer, but like the common comorbidities associated with that, and have that team in place instead of farming people out to this specialist or that specialist. So that's why I feel like we're going to see a move toward like a more divisional rather than a professional bureaucracy in the future.
I agree. I'm working on 2 quality projects right now, and they're both around centered patient of care. One is hypermobility with pediatric patients, so it's rheumatology, cardiology. There's all these different disciplines that are coming together. I'm going to do a clinic with that one patient. Same there. I'm doing one with neurology, so pediatric patients that have a brain issue, but they're not quite sure exactly what it is. So having a collective group between neurology, psychology, and child development, instead of, like you said, farming them out to all these different appointments and different people, and nobody's talking to each other. Now they're all wanting to do these quality initiatives where they're all working on them together at the same time, so everyone has a piece of that they can contribute, but they don't need to own the whole thing because it's not quite all theirs. So I definitely think it's going to move more towards that centered model of care, definitely.
And I remembered my name. The IPU is an integrated practice unit.
Oh.
That's the name of the team. It escaped me for a minute.
I've actually heard of a physician mention that several months ago at it was some workshop I went to, and I think he was somewhere near Lenore, and he had it wasn't necessarily just one patient, but I think he was a family practitioner, but he also had I think he had a psychologist maybe on site, and he had maybe another specialist on site, and he did that to get that whole kind of, it's not necessarily interdisciplinary, but it's different specialties involved in the patient's care in one place. And so while the patient was there seeing him, they could also see the psychologist if they needed to, and this other specialist, which I thought was a really good idea, and it would be really beneficial, but it would all have to line up. And of course, the patient would need every service that was every service that was there and available. But I think it's a great idea. I would just be interested to see how it actually works, because with a patient, or with a physician's panel size being 1,100 patients, I would venture to say that that the majority of patients are not going to need the same discipline of specialists. And so how would you coordinate that care? That would be my concern. And so if you had a certain, a surgical oncologist, for instance, you gave the example of someone with breast cancer. If you had a surgical oncologist, social worker, of course, that could be probably almost anybody, anybody these days. But if you had, very specific needs, you would have to be very strategic in how you first scheduled those patients, to come into the practice, because they would all have to align up when that particular specialty was there. And I would just be very curious as to how that would work. That would be very, very interesting to see.
But I feel like that could lead into the last question, where it was talking about the determinants of successful teamwork, because all of those people working together to help that one patient, that's patient-centered, and that gives them a positive experience because they can knock so many things out within one visit or within one system. So it's easier for the doctors to see their records and communicate with each other, since they're all on the same computer system and that kind of thing. But scheduling is an issue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So to fully answer that last question, what does a successful team look like? Like you just said, they all need to be there, have the common goal. So if it's being patient-centered, this is the goal that we're working on, making sure they're all on board, making sure everyone knows what their roles are within that team. definitely the communication. I mean, that's huge in teamwork. You can't have a team without being able to communicate with each other. And just, making it something that's manageable size. And let's see what I can do. Being able to speak up if there's a problem, being able to communicate that, and and to have the other thing I had was that they needed to have a specific goal so that everyone knows where they stand if the goal or not.
I think all of
Any
those are
thoughts on that
important.
last question?
I think they're all important and tie into what Amanda and Vicky said about treatment plans for patients.
Yeah.
We've been too fragmented for too long.
Yep.
Well, does anybody else have any other comments about any of that for the questions?
I think so.
Think so.
No, I think we're good.
All right, then I'll stop recording.
All right.
Okay.